Hi Level 3s, this video is on comparing the skulls and skeletons of humans, chimpanzees and of Lucy, who is a new species that we're going to learn about today. So what I want you to do as a bit of a reminder of what we did last week on primate characteristics, I want you to pause the video and try to list as many characteristics of primates as possible. So pause it now. Write your list. You should come up with a few things such as colour vision, binocular vision, the fact that the eyes are on the front of the face. You could have come up with anything else that we looked at last week as well to do with other parts of the body. You could have talked about the pentadactyl limbs, so having 5 digits on each hand and each foot. So hopefully you got a few there. So I want us to start off by meeting Lucy, and we have got our Lucy skull here. Lucy, her scientific name is Australopithecus afarensis, and she was named Lucy because when they were digging up her fossil, the Beatles song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was playing, so they named her Lucy. They're fairly sure that it is a female's skeleton, so we call her Lucy. She is thought to be the common ancestor for both the genuses of Australopithecines and the genus Homo. And she said to be about that she was the shared ancestor for us about 3 to 4 million years ago. A few more pictures here of Lucy, obviously a reconstruction of what they think she looks like based on her skull. The picture with the skeletons shows obviously a Homo sapien, and the other one with the coloured bits is Lucy. The coloured bits show the parts of the fossils that we've actually definitely found. So we've got a fairly good representation of what her skeleton would have looked like. So we're going to start with a comparison. We're going to go top to bottom of the skeleton. We're going to start with the brain and the skull, and particularly the teeth. We're going to look at the spine, the pelvis, legs and feet, and how all that is related to bipedalism and nakedness. So the first one is looking at the brain, and in particular the cranium. The cranium is the brain case, so where the brain is kept and protected. That's the whole job of the cranium, is that is where it is protected from impacts and that kind of thing. In chimpanzees, it's quite small. Australopithecines, so Lucy, is probably not much different to a chimpanzee. And then obviously us humans, we have about 1,300 cc, so we're definitely bigger. We also have more of a dome shape cranium than if you look at Lucy, whose is much longer and flatter almost. So, difference in brain size. So chimpanzee, you're looking at about just on 400 cc's, that's an average. Going to be a little bit different between males and females. Lucy, so I said a little bit more than chimpanzee, so somewhere between 400 to 500 cc's, and then humans on average 1,350 cc's. So that's in volume. So and they work that out pretty much by pouring liquid into the craniums that they find. If we look at teeth, if we remember back to last week with our chimpanzee here, chimpanzees have these big canines. Males have them, females don't. There's an example of sexual dimorphism. Even though chimpanzees mainly eat plant material, they eat a small amount of meat for protein. These are used for displays between males to say who's stronger and who's going to be in charge. If we look at Lucy, remember we did find Lucy is a female, so there's probably some sexual dimorphism here, but the canines are very small. and you guys can have a look at these properly in class. The canines are really small. Of course, even smaller are humans, and there's no sexual dimorphism in the teeth. We have very small canines, and they are mainly just for eating. They're not used for displays. The jaws. So we'll go back to Lucy. So a U-shaped jaw for Lucy, quite similar to chimpanzees. So it's U-shaped. If we look at a human's, it's much more V-shaped, a lot wider towards the back of the jaw. One of the most important features, and this all comes down to bipedalism, is the positions of the foramen magnum. Foramen magnums are the holes back of the skull where the spinal cord enters. So if we look at the chimpanzees and compare that to a human, you can definitely see that the human's foramen magnum is much more under the skull. Chimpanzees is much further back. If we look at Lucy, it's a little bit more under the skull than it is in chimpanzees, and that was one of the first things that researchers would have seen and realised that maybe this species was actually bipedal. We talked about a couple of these last week, but again, things like the chins. Humans have a chin. We don't have a brow ridge. If we look at Lucy, she definitely still had that brow ridge, which shows that she's still a little bit more chimpanzee than she might be Homo sapien. And there's another picture of the jaws there. So if we have a look, the Homo sapiens is definitely more V-shaped, much wider at the base, coming in towards the mouth. Oh, issues here, hang on. Okay, the spine. So humans have an S-shaped spine, and it is actually quite long. Okay, we have an area above our hips and below our ribs that is actually not covered by any bony material. Chimpanzees have a curved spine. It's very short and very stiff. One of the big things they found when they found Lucy's skeleton is that her spine was much more similar to that of a human. It had a bit more of a shape to it, and it was longer. And again, that kind of yelled out bipedalism to the researchers. Another example here, and this one's just looking at between chimpanzees and humans, but chimpanzees have this kind of oval shaped rib cage, and humans have a much more flatter rib cage, and that was all again to do with walking upright. The pelvis and the foot are really important ones when looking at bipedalism. So chimpanzees is quite long, really, and quite narrow, if you're looking this way. So humans is really short, but a human's pelvis is much wider, okay? Especially in females. Females have more hips, more hips kind of than a male. Our Lucy is almost right there in the middle. Obviously there are bits of her of the fossil missing, but her pelvis looks far more human than it does chimpanzees. Same with the femur. So the top of your leg, where your hip joints meet, okay, the femur looked a lot more similar. Same with the feet. Chimpanzees had that opposable big toe. Lucy didn't have that, and neither do we. Okay. Some of the other features of the feet is that humans have an arch to their foot, and that's really good for walking long distances and for shock absorbing. Lucy's feet were a lot more similar to humans than they were to chimpanzees. And again, this all relates back to the fact that humans are bipedal, and we have these differences because of the fact that we are bipedal and not arboreal. Here is more about the legs. We're going to talk about the valgus angle in class, and we will look at that on ourselves, on our own legs. But what it is that the femur actually has an angle. So this would be your knee here, and this would be where it meets your pelvis at the top here. And there is actually, the femur runs on an angle, okay, and that is known as the valgus angle. Chimpanzees, their femur is straight up and down, okay, which gives them that kind of swaying look when they try and walk on 2 feet. Again, as you guessed, it's all to do with bipedalism. Here is just this kind of overall view of the differences between Homo sapiens and Lucy. Obviously, the first one that you're probably going to spot is the difference in height. Lucy was quite a bit shorter. She stood at maybe 1.3 meters, maybe a little bit less. But if we go from the top down again, Lucy is a big jaw. Ours is much smaller and it's V-shaped, whereas Lucy's is more U-shaped. Longer arm bones, whereas in humans now our legs are actually longer than our arms. Lucy still had much longer arms than legs, which showed that she did still spend time knuckle walking and in trees as being a living arborally. She has, similar to us, a narrower pelvis. Her femurs were similar to ours again, and she had a valgus angle just like we do, but hard to see in this image. And our feet were very similar. So her feet were designed for walking. She didn't have an opposable thumb, which chimpanzees would have used for swinging in trees. So I'd like you to have a go at, follow this link and have a go at the comparing and contrasting the skeletons. And finally, just to finish, a little bit of a giggle to finish us off for this lesson. When you guys come to class, I'll have the skulls out for you, and you can have a go with them yourself. Compare things like the form and magnum, the shapes of the jaws. So I'll see you soon. Thanks.